Olá a todos, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Talking Jazz. Encontro-me em Maputo e hoje proponho-me a entrevistar um grande saxofonista norte-americano que se encontra em Maputo para um concerto que vocês não vão querer perder no dia 24 de setembro, na Galeria do Porto de Maputo. Estarão em palco Timóteo Kush, Indigo Blue e aqui o meu convidado especial para esta entrevista. Paul Nicholas Roth.
Right.
Did I pronounce well your name?
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm very good.
Yeah.
How are you? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine too.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't speak Portuguese.
Maybe.
I can understand.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You speak
Italian, Spanish,
mhm.
French,
Yeah.
well, German.
I guess there are some words.
There's some overlap.
Yeah, that you can catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can, as much as you want to speak to your
Yeah.
audience in Portuguese, I'll try and.
No,
Yeah.
that's I'm not fluent in English, but I hope we
You're
can
very-
get it.
You're
get
very
along.
fluent.
Oh, thank
you're
you.
good, yeah.
Thank you. Very kind from you.
Yeah.
So I have seen some words about you, and I would like to know first, to start. There is a physical principle that says that a body cannot occupy two spaces at the same time.
Spaces, okay.
But you managed around some years ago. You managed to teach
Right.
in two institutions. You managed to be a performer. You managed to be a musicologist,
Yes.
and you managed to do a lot of things at the same time. How did you manage that?
Yeah. That's a good question. Well, it takes a lot of time, so you feel busy all the time. Feel always busy, always doing things. I don't know. I guess you have to be careful about your time and time management. I don't know. Do your time management, like you have this time for this, this time for this, this time for this. Yeah. I mean, I like to do all these things. I like to teach very much, so I enjoy that. And I think when you try and, like, the scholarship stuff is like, you know, studying music culture, music history, but more as like social, how it works socially. And so I think when you do that, you become a better teacher, you learn more about things. And, you know, when you're also playing music, it also helps you teach, it also helps you study music. So everything is kind of in like maybe in like a feedback loop. And it helps grow each element, you know. So I guess that's important to try and do all of them. But yeah, it's hard to be good at all of them too. I don't know if I'm good at all of them. Right now because I'm finishing this PhD, right? So it's been very heavy on the scholarship side. But I'm almost done. I'm at like the last year of writing always a dissertation, which sometimes I don't like. It's very hard. It's hard for me, and it takes a lot of time. But I always try and practice a little bit, play my instrument, and still write some music. So I want to get back more towards the playing side. A lot of it the past couple of years has been on the scholarship side. So sometimes I can make some albums during that period, and it happens very fast.
Yeah.
We do it. We write music very fast. We rehearse very fast. We record very fast. and then it's out on YouTube or Spotify. Okay, it's there, good. But yeah, so it's like a balance, you know.
Yeah.
But I go through periods where some things are heavier, and then I want to make other things like more, you know, involved in the future. So.
Were you teaching different subjects in those two institutions?
Yeah,
in California.
Yeah, they would be different, but like I taught. Let's see, I would teach some jazz history. I taught a hip hop history class. Yeah, and I'm very careful as like a white guy in America to be very acknowledge my background, my racial background, because so much of hip hop obviously is focused on Black American experience. And yeah, so you know, very clear about that. And so that was in one institution, and then in the other, it was more like kind of improvised music as tied to jazz, more kind of playing as an ensemble. We would talk about a little history, but yeah, so they were sort of different things. Some more focused on history, social history, some more focused on actually playing music.
Yes.
So that's a nice mix to have too. You know, talk about the history, but then you also talk about how you play things, how you do things.
Yeah. So talking about histories, jazz has evolved through all these years, and
Right.
We had so many different styles, and sometimes people used to say, "Ah, man, I don't think this is jazz." Maybe it's easy to define rock music, pop music, but it seems like kind hard to define exactly what is jazz. Could you help us to give some highlights, some elements that can help us to identify this is jazz, or maybe this is a subgenre of jazz through all these years since maybe the 90s until these days, all these different styles that jazz has evolved through.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
And I think some people are always thinking about that. So let me think about this carefully. And yeah, you know, I think sometimes within jazz, it's nice to leave the definition open, right? So not to say that it's this. But I think, I mean, one helpful thing maybe is to have a historical perspective, and to know like whatever ragtime and then Dixieland and the swing era and bebop and hard bop and cool jazz and free jazz, or the new thing it was called at the time, but and then different mixtures that, you know, there's a kind of like a jazz narrative that goes up through the 60s and then it kind of opens. So I guess it's nice to have that historical knowledge about how these styles have been defined, but it's yeah, I don't think it always needs a definition, you know. I think and people have always tried to define it, and you know, this I'll just say too, there was this kind of movement in the United States in the 80s and 90s to sort of redefine jazz, like someone like Wynton Marsalis. It's like, okay, it's this and it's this and it's this, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's nice to recognize how some of these historical things have developed, but you know, if people say what they're doing is jazz, maybe it's good. If some people are improvising, and you know, there's, I don't know, like it could be jazz. Maybe it's important for some people to define it. If there's like cultural grants for jazz around, you know, that's important. But I think the definition should stay open. Some people say it's a spirit. There's a spirit of jazz. Maybe that's cool too, you know. But yeah, it's hard to define. Those things,
I think Louis Armstrong said something about that if you have to ask, maybe you will never know what it is.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean that's a good one too. But you know, there can be jazz elements of music, like, or some people have jazz backgrounds and they're bringing it into, you know, different musical formations. And yeah. So I think it's, you don't have to leave it to, it needs certain instruments or it needs a certain rhythmic feel. I think it should be open. And now, jazz has kind of moved all over the world. So many people are familiar with an idea of it and who have been some of its, important musician people throughout its history. So it can take all sorts of shapes and forms. I don't know.
Yeah. So I've listened on Spotify some works of yours, one like avant-garde stuff,
Right.
and another like that to me sounds like really jazz.
Yes. Yeah, those are good examples.
Yeah, like the Chatterbox.
Yeah.
That was released last year. I guess you were playing as a trio. Yes.
Yeah, as a trio.
As a trio. Which I love, and I would recommend everybody to check it out on
It's
Spotify.
on Spotify. It's on YouTube.
Yeah. So without putting all these subgenres of jazz and many styles, I would like we to focus on the avant-garde and the maybe the more free approach to the songs that I heard on this Chatterbox. Can you maybe put us in a clear frame, like what is instrumental music, what is improvisational music? Because on some of the songs that I have heard on Spotify, I guess were only you on the sax and someone playing like maybe sounded like a OHL or a double bass with a
double
bow.
bass, yeah.
Yeah. Can you contextualize for us these different settings when you play with a band, when you are more free to express yourself?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. There's another album I will send you later, but it's even more, and this is getting back to this talk about jazz and stuff, but it's more. It's really like electroacoustic improvisation. I have this other project I'm working with someone. He does only computer music, and I'm playing my saxophone through some live processing with Ableton, and so I'm kind of distorting it, and he's also distorting it. So is that jazz? I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but I'm coming from my jazz background within this. And they all function similarly. So we have this jazz trio, which is more conventional, bass, drums, saxophone, like melodies, form, improvisation. So that's the Chatterbox, this kind of more traditional jazz trio. The other one, it's called Signal Blur. It's with this bassist. He's well known in the American avant-garde jazz scene. His name is Mark Dresser. He used to play with Anthony Braxton. I don't know.
Oh.
Do you know Braxton?
No, I'm not sure. Maybe I have heard something of him. Don't know that.
Yeah, he's much more. You could say avant-garde, but kind of more abstract, contemporary. I don't know, maybe not contemporary, but coming out of the 60s, 70s, 80s, doing a lot of different abstractions. But yeah, the idea is still the same. We have this more avant-garde one, the duo with the acoustic bassist. It's still, things are written. We have like a theme, sort of a melody, and then we improvise on them. And that's the same with the other conventional one, the trio. We have some melody, harmony. We're improvising with it. So the spirit is kind of the same. I think sometimes the forms are less defined. Like with the trio, the form is maybe more defined, and you're working with a drummer and bass player, so there's some like roles of the instruments. The other duo is, I think we try and expand our roles a little bit. Like, what is the saxophone supposed to do? What is the bass supposed to do? How can we be surprised? Have some surprises in the roles that we play. Usually the bass does this, the saxophone does this. We're trying to mix those, kind of, invert them or disguise them or do different things. So, so for me with improvising, that's, that can be very exciting to change the roles. I think if you have, we saw a great band the other night a guitar trio doing some sort of jazz or funk things, you know.
Yeah, by the way, we were at the Walter Mavos concert in a music venue here in Maputo. So he was playing with Steli Mondiane and Albano Carlos.
Yeah, and they were great. And
Yeah.
Walter, I really like. He has a fantastic sound and very fantastic feel on his guitar, and very nice compositions. Um, and it was, yeah, it was nice to see. I mean, they still, I think they still stick kind of to the like conventional roles of the instrument. The guitar is playing melodies, improvising. The bass is sometimes taking solos, but playing the bass part. The drummer playing the drum part. But within that, you know, they're sort of very free, and different dynamics are happening, kind of different directions in the solos. So that was very nice. And yeah, and that's sort of how this trio of mine functions. Same thing. The duo is, we try and pull those roles apart a little bit, and for me that's kind of, that can be exciting too. I think for some people it's a bit more confusing, because then you're confusing the norm, you know. You're once you start to mess with the form, some people can say, I don't like this, it's not what I'm used to. But yes, and I don't know why some people like that stuff more than others.
So, in your background, not necessarily like the traditional jazz, can we point maybe Ornette Coleman, Don Cherry, and other avant-garde musicians?
Yes. Did you read this? Because I'm doing my dissertation on Don Cherry. You did that? Okay. Yeah. I thought you were just putting names up there. But, I mean, so as a saxophonist, alto saxophonist, coming up from a jazz background, you know, obviously Charlie Parker is huge, and Ornette Coleman, this is some jazz history, whatever, but, you know, Ornette Coleman was really coming out of Charlie Parker, and he was doing the same thing as Charlie Parker, but making some melodies that had little funny twists and turns, and then he would actually improvise form. So they talk about Ornette Coleman's improvising form. And also the sound, very kind of open, a sound that asks a lot of questions, I think, Ornette Coleman. And Ornette Coleman was sort of the, you know, this is the turn from bebop, Charlie Parker, to eventual like free jazz, and that opens a lot of improvisation in Europe, like free jazz, experimental improvisation. I don't know here. I'm not as familiar in regions of Africa how much like the improvised music sort of strains were happening, but
I think we are more grounded to the forms, like the traditional forms. We didn't much of us as listeners.
Right.
We don't dig that much to this free jazz avant-garde. I think that's something that maybe musicians used to dig, but the majority of the of the listeners,
and that's more, okay, right? Yeah, that's good. I mean, sometimes I don't like avant-garde either. If it's sometimes if it's too noisy, and that can also get tiring. And I think you want to bring your audience with you. This is funny because this has always been a debate since this music started to happen, but it's interesting because Don Cherry is someone, he was never too avant-garde. He loved to play melodies, really nice singable melodies. And I think he once said that he wanted everyone to leave the concert singing something.
Wow.
So I think and that's why I'm so fascinated with him. He's a musician who could, on one hand, play very melodically and very lyrically and very beautifully, but he would always sort of break it somehow. That would be very nice, but then he would do something to turn it upside down or break it or knock everything down, but then he would put it back together again. So he was always doing little things to surprise, you know, within the ensemble. Okay, let's take it here, then let's take it here, then let's take it here, then let's take it there, let's explode it, but we'll kind of bring it back. So he's very special for that. And it was always like he wanted to bring people in, but he would always give them some challenges and throw some things out there that would, you know, turn things. And I don't know, for me that's exciting as a listener. I when I listen, I still want to have a little surprise. and that's why like Walter's trio was so nice. They would it was very listenable, but they were always, I think, throwing some little surprises, changing things. So I think that's what makes it really nice to, and that's part of going back to that definition of jazz. I think that's a nice thing when it can stretch and when it can surprise, and it can feel spontaneous. Not all jazz is like that, because some jazz in history is not spontaneous at all. It's like, say, a big band that played written music, and the solos were always written in the same. Maybe it would swing really hard, people would dance, but so again, it's so hard once you try and make some definition. It's so hard to like put some strict parameters, but certainly for me, I love that feeling of spontaneity, that there's people making music together and making decisions together that are sometimes making some turns, because that's, I don't know, it's like life, right? You want the ups and the surprises.
Absolutely. I think Ornette Coleman recorded like album called The Shape of Jazz to Come. Yeah. Is it possible somehow to break like all the rules without knowing them? What I mean with that? As musicians, we always try to bring up something that can create like a surprise element to the people. But because jazz is mostly from a perspective like very maybe academic and intellectualized music, you really have to study and to know the history. But is it possible, or do you recommend to a jazz musicians already starting breaking the rules, or you would recommend you should maybe first check what has been done through all the history? As I guess Arnold Coleman said that this is the shape of jazz to come. Because maybe was tired of this Charlie Parker things, Dixieland, the bebop, and was trying to take a new direction. Maybe he started the tradition. So what would you recommend, like younger jazz musicians coming up and already trying to break the rules and already trying to bring something new to the table?
Good question. I mean, it's interesting because with Ornette Coleman, and I think this is great for everybody to know, everybody to acknowledge, but he was, and Don Cherry, so I'm writing my dissertation on Don Cherry. So I spent a lot of time thinking about Don Cherry and trying to think with his ideas, and he was very close to Ornette Coleman. They worked together. They both recorded this album, The Shape of Jazz. I think it's 1958, something like that. But so I'm not really an Ornette Coleman expert, but I'm studying someone who he worked with very closely. So that's where I'm coming from with this. But I do know that what they did with that group in The Shape of Jazz to Come, it was very close to, it was bebop, essentially. It was bebop, but they were just doing some little things that were kind of making, like we would say, a challenge to bebop, or an intervention on bebop. And again, part of that was bebop always existed within the form. You had a blues, like 12-bar form, we say a 32-bar form, because they were playing like popular Broadway songs of the time, and then they were putting their own kind of more complicated melodies on them, and then improvising like fantastically on them and changing harmonies. So there was like this new complexity kind of, and so Ornette Coleman's group, they took that same idea. They were still playing bebop lines and similar forms, but then when they would improvise, the form was no longer their parameters. They were still always playing on the tune, so it wasn't we play a melody and then we go do whatever. No, it was they play the melody, and then they would try and find the forms themselves, still playing the song. So that was kind of the opening. All of a sudden, you don't have to stick to the form anymore. So that was why it was so kind of, I think, mind-blowing. And they had sounds that were so different and like really wonderful, compelling, and very personal. So, and each musician, Don Cherry has a really wonderful, very distinct sound. Charlie Hayden was a bass player,
Wow.
very distinct double bass sound, and then either Billy Higgins or Blackwell, who are these drummers, very distinct sound. So, so I think that all went into that group, and so for them, I think they knew the history. Ed Blackwell, the drummer, for instance, he grew up in New Orleans, I know, and studied a lot of like early drumming and coming out of Dixieland. He was a tap dancer.
Yeah.
So, and Ornette Coleman was this really kind of deep student of Charlie Parker's music. Don Cherry, same thing. Charlie Hayden, he came from like country music background. I think he was from Arkansas or something, but I think also very familiar with bebop. So they knew these traditions very well, and they just kind of took one more step that opened a whole lot of things. So back to what you're saying, I think knowledge is always good, right? Understanding knowledge and history, I think, is always good, and so it's good to have the knowledge, but also try and do your own thing. And it's probably always a balance. Like you study some things that are going on in history, you kind of see what people have done before you, but you always want to have that also like kind of creative trajectory to do your own thing. So yeah, I think it's really important to try and practice styles of the past and learn traditions and learn like the tools of doing things, but don't become not to say a prisoner, but don't become like bound to those, But at the same side, some people come out of nowhere and do something incredible and break all the rules. But I think generally that like that saying, like you need to know the rules to break them. I think that's sort of the way to go.
We can't invent the wheel, but maybe we can paint it in different colors and give maybe something different to it.
I just like knowledge is good. It's good to know stuff. You just don't want to be like just so captivated in something that you can't think for yourself, I think, because you still want to keep things alive and in the moment a little bit.
So talking about the tradition, the knowledge that we try to sort of steal from the all the guys like Charlie Parker from bebop era and all this era, what were your main influence jazz heroes when you started to play the instruments?
When I started, Charlie Parker. I had a teacher making me learn all these solos. And those are great if anybody is studying jazz, just to learn Charlie Parker, even just the melodies, so good. And then you see his solos and stuff, and his sound. He's such a great. Usually he had a drug habit. Probably a lot of well-known musicians did, especially kind of like decades ago. But so sometimes he sounds not in great shape. But when he's really on it, his sound is incredible. And again, Ornette Coleman has always been a huge influence. Someone like even older woodwindists, like someone like Sidney Bechet, who maybe was not an early influence, but he's this old sort of Dixieland style clarinet player, but amazing blues player, improviser, and again, just sound. He has this really wide vibrato that I love. He's someone who I always really like. There's a saxophonist, Lee Konitz, who I liked a lot. Lee Konitz. He played with Miles Davis early, and then did some other things. And then
out from the alto sax, do you have some other musicians, maybe pianists and tenor saxophone?
Sure. You
can mention them.
All the like Thelonious Monk. I like his composing, his playing. He's great because he does something very special with his technique, where it almost sounds like he's like a beginner or something. And even his composing has this very sort of playful thing. So, but he's someone who could really play, he kind of transcended his skills to make himself sound like he was almost it's like a beginner again. That's very hard to do. I think that's very, very important. Don Cherry also, he kind of had a style of playing where he could make his playing sound vulnerable, which is really, really nice. That's really hard to do. You have to like go beyond the standard technique, and you access another level of sounding like you're experimenting in an instrument. So that's he's really great for that. I'm trying to think of even more contemporary people. I've been, before this I was in London, and there's this great tenor saxophonist there named Shabaka Hutchings, who he's a great saxophone player, does some great music.
Tenor.
He plays tenor, and then I think he stopped playing tenor, and now he's playing this shakuhachi flute, which is a Japanese flute. He just put out this album, he's playing this flute. And also another contemporary musician, and this was someone I got to study with a little bit. Their name is Matana Roberts, and they're an American saxophonist, composer, doing a lot of visual art, multimedia things, but they have some just like outstanding albums. I don't know, they have this series called Coin. People can look, Matana Roberts, Coin. And yeah, really, really nice. And I love their sound.
So during your learning process of the language, jazz language, trying to absorb from all these heroes that you mentioned, when did you realize that I think that now I can express myself? Because sometimes it's a little bit frustrating learning like a jazz language, mainly for us that we don't live in the US. I think back in time, I don't know these days, but maybe you could put a radio station and you could listen jazz everywhere. But as Africans that we have interest in learning jazz, sometimes it becomes a little bit tricky and harder to learn this language, because although it's an international music language, it comes mainly from it's an Afro-American music form. So when did you realize that now I think that I can express myself, and is there anything during the process that's really triggered that process?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was playing in bands in my high school when I was 16, 18. I think I started playing the saxophone when I was 13. Maybe I had bands before that. I don't know. Like, I think it definitely takes a certain dedication, probably, and determination. It takes a lot of hours. I mean, we talk about someone like Charlie Parker. He would practice for 15 hours a day for years. The Ornette Coleman band, when they did The Shape of Jazz to Come, they would practice for like 4 hours every day for a year or 2 years. They grew up in Los Angeles. So so I don't know, for me, when I felt, I think we always thought we were doing something expressive. You're playing in a high school band where you think you're doing something. So that's hard. Maybe just from an instrument standpoint, I only feel like the last few years I've really been able to have like a certain control of the instrument, to really like blend things, and it can go away too if I'm not practicing a lot too. It can start to go away. So, and now I've been playing for. Someone asked me this the other day.
30 years.
Almost 28 years. Yeah. So like, you're talking about it took me 23 years to really feel like, okay, now I have some. So it takes a long time. But yeah, hopefully it's not like hopefully the process isn't always frustrating. I still made, because I went to a jazz college, so we still made music. Some music that we recorded, I still listen to, and I said, oh, okay, some of it sounds nice. So hopefully it still brings you joy. I think that's the thing. Like, it still makes you happy to play, because it's nice to make music. We have to, I think, be thankful that we can make music. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. But like anything, if you want to be really good at something, usually it takes a lot of work, but I think it's okay to put in the work and be happy, 'cause what else are we gonna do in life, You can just sit around and do nothing if you want, or you apply yourself to music. It's nice. So.
I guess maybe sometimes we are as learners, as beginners of this, trying to absorb this jazz language. Maybe we have in mind our hero has reference, and it can become a little bit like overwhelming. Like I'm so far from that level.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah,
always on a journey.
Yeah,
always on a journey. Yeah,
we should have some fun during the process, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess hopefully, if you can have a band and have friends to play with and still be making music, then it's still fun and like get to play for people, whether it's in a park or on the street or in a club or whatever. So hopefully that can still, bring you some joy, happiness. I think, I guess with everything else, there's going to be ups and downs. I think the nice thing is that if you're frustrated, usually that means it's going to push you to work harder, and hopefully you fix your frustration. So for me, and I know other people have talked about this, but when I get into a period of frustration musically or whatever, it means you're growing sometimes. So sometimes it's good to have that period, and maybe that's the way to look at it. Like, okay, well, I'm frustrated, but this is a period of growth for me. I'm going to work through it, and so yeah, you can embrace it, but hopefully still enjoy just making music, because we don't only want to be frustrated. We still want to enjoy it, but that's the thing. You still hear stuff. You might always be like a tiny bit frustrated, like, oh, I wish this sounded better, I wish this worked better. So maybe it's just part of the journey, and with music, it's like it can never end. It just keeps going, and that's cool, right?
So Paul, you are also a music curator. I think you have during 2013 and 2018, you were like a co-curator of improvisational music happening in Germany.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? What were the bands, the artists that you took to that event, and what is the public that used to attend to this?
Yeah.
Some qualities of the public that attends to this improvisational music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are funny questions. The audience, who goes to this, but so this is a space. It was in Berlin. It's a space that's been around for like a long time. So it has some people, like an audience coming, and they would do a lot of music that. I mean, one thing funny. We're talking about the avant-garde and how here people aren't as accustomed to that. I don't enjoy it as much. This music almost never had like rhythm, like a beat. You could never. I mean, you could dance to it, but not really. It's more abstract sound without rhythm as like a foundation. So some people like that, because again, for me, I like this type of music because sometimes I would hear sounds that I've never heard before. I would hear people making sounds, whether an acoustic instrument or an electronic instrument or some combination I never heard before. I say, I don't know how you do that. And then people would combine these sounds. And that was very cool. That could be really great. And again, like the form, you don't know what's going on, the sounds you've never heard before. So that's what was so compelling. And most of the audience was like other artists doing more experimental art things. So I think it, on one hand, maybe it takes a certain amount of privilege in your life to, I want to acknowledge that. Maybe not everybody can do that because, first of all, you don't make as much money probably in the experimental arts. So, maybe some of these people are coming from more privileged backgrounds. I don't know. But I think there's like a socioeconomic thing that helps sustain this sort of community. Maybe some people would disagree with that. I don't know. But there's a lot of people who are doing more experimenting in their art. Not always young people, but I don't know. I guess it was also diverse, but it was a particular audience, like a smaller audience. They were sort of like niche audiences. But in Berlin in Europe at least, it's been very cheap to live for a long time because of the history of the Berlin Wall and all these things. So it's attracted artists for a long time. And so certain pockets of these artists were really into this experimental sound stuff that was very arrhythmic. And that was the big distinction, because you couldn't really dance to it. You can still be experimental with sound and have a groove, like experimental cumbia bands or whatever. But that was a big distinction. You'd usually sit in a chair and listen and say, interesting. You wouldn't get up and move. But again, it's very different things, like things I've never heard before. So for a while that was really exciting. And then as a curator, just like an organizer, it's nice to try and put together different different musical acts or different sets and give different variety, and just showcase a lot of the great work that people are doing. So I don't know, that's kind of what was going on there. But
so Paul, you are going to perform on the 24th September.
Yeah.
Would you like to say some words and invite the people to the concert?
Yeah, but it's it's the Maputo Global. How do we say?
Maputo Global Concert.
Maputo Global Concert, yeah. And Indigo Blue is playing, right? It's on the 24th. Playing with Timoteo. How do you say your last name? Kush. Timoteo Kush Quartet. Timotheo's off stage.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be some new first time collaborative music happening. I know that all the musicians are great. I've just heard some people playing. So people come check it out. I can't remember where we're playing.
Galeria.
Yeah, Galeria. Yeah. I just got here Saturday, 2 days ago. So information is, but I think it's going to be really nice.
Before we close this interview, I will always ask to my guests to leave one or two advice to younger musicians that are interested to jazz. Would you like to say one or two advices to them?
Practice a lot. Try and practice. Play with recordings. It's really important. Record yourself and listen back and say, I could do this better. But just have fun. Put in the time. Play with your friends. Try and learn some history about the music. Play with recordings is really important. Play with Charlie Parker for anybody. That's good. Use your phone and record yourself. That's for me, that's been so helpful. I still do that when I practice. I put my phone on, I record, even if I'm playing a scout. And then I listen back and I say, is my sound there? Is the tempo there? Everything like this. And it's so nice that, most of us have phones now. We can record ourselves, so that's really cool. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. That's what
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Por hoje é tudo. Tivemos mais um episódio do Talking Jazz e estivemos aqui com o Paul Nicholas Roth, diretamente dos Estados Unidos. É saxofonista, musicólogo, curador de eventos, e encontra-se aqui em Maputo para um concerto no dia 24 de setembro. Não percam essa oportunidade de ver o Paul em palco, Timóteo Kush, Indigo Blue com Xavier Machiana, que abrimos aqui as portas do seu estúdio para esta entrevista, a quem agradeço profundamente. E espero trazer mais convidados que possam inspirar-vos, e até jazz! Thank you. Tchau.